So I just want to start with kind of like what, in my opinion, is the most important question because it kind of sets the stage for a lot of big investing decisions. And it's, there are two camps. One camp thinks that America, the United States, is headed for a hyperinflationary event like Zimbabwe and the Weimar Republic. And therefore, you just have to pile into gold and silver and watch it skyrocket. Another camp thinks that we're going to be like the British Empire, right? Which has devalued its currency over the last 2,000 years. And they're still standing and seem relatively okay. Where do you think America is headed?
Both of the above. I don't think we're Zimbabwe yet. I've made small investments in Zimbabwe recently, as a matter of fact. But history shows, Elliot, first of all, history shows that no country stayed on top forever. 100, 200 years is the max, and then they peak and go into decline. So I presume we're no different from anybody else. But one of the problems with history is people don't learn the lessons of history. We had a president recently who didn't know history, or if he did know history, he said he was smarter than history. I know I'm not smarter than history, and history is very clear. No nation and no currency, by the way, because they sometimes go hand in hand, has stayed on top forever. So America is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We have troops in over 100 countries. There are people who would say that we're overextended financially, economically, militarily, and it looks like they might be right. So yes, no, I worry. It's not a good time to be young in America because what the young people are going to inherit is mind-boggling. I've got two teenage kids, and it disturbs me. It's good to be old because I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay for all of this. I get the benefits. They're borrowing a lot of money, spending a lot of money. Pretty well. I'm old. Okay, do it. It helps me, but it doesn't help the future. 100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number two. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. Literally, the IMF had to fly into Heathrow to bail them out. So it can happen. It has happened. It often happens. And the symptoms, the money printing, the debt, et cetera, have always led to the kind of problems you're talking about. I don't think it'll happen in 2001 or 2021 or even 2022, but it's on the way.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because just thinking about what the investment implications are of this kind of event happening, because like Great Britain, if you had bought their stock market during World War II, you would have made an absolute fortune because I think it just went straight up from that. So it's like, how bad will it get essentially in America if devaluing the currency seems to be everyone's go-to move?
If you buy just about any country in the middle of a war, it goes straight up. Even if you bought Japan, if you were careful, you still came out making a lot of money, or Germany, even though both countries were destroyed. One of the things I have learned is if you buy in a catastrophe, you often make a lot of money. So I'm not advocating that we have a war so that we can all buy in wartime or anything. But your point is good. Yes, Britain was great. But the people who stayed in Britain didn't have a great life. Their standard of living compared to what it was before, it was not the same country. It's not the same world. It was amazing. I mean, I was actually a student in England in some of those years, and there were exchange controls. I can remember 20 years after the war, there were still sites in London that were known as bomb sites where the Germans had dropped bombs. 20 years later, they still hadn't cleaned them up. They didn't have any money, So the standard of living was not great. You couldn't take money out of the country. I mean, it was a mess. But that had been the richest country in the world.
Well, that's a great, it supports your point that printing money never, endlessly will lead you to that kind of situation where your standard of living goes down. And that's a great education because, I mean, yeah, just looking at the history, I see the British stock market go up, but you're saying there was terrible standard of living, there were problems with hyperinflation. And I do compare us to the British Empire because they had the reserve currency once and they lost it. So That's really good to know.